On this episode of The Art of Hustle,
I met up with Evelynn Escobar-Thomas, social media maven and hiking enthusiast. We spoke about working with brands as an influencer, how to build an online community, and her hustle, of course. Here comes the hike. All right. Could you talk a little bit about the work that you do and kind of some of your hobbies?
Yeah, so I am a social media strategist and content creator by day. That's my actual job. Like I have a full-time job. And so I'm the social media manager at Undefeated right now. But then I also freelance doing the same work. So whether it's digital consulting, social media, content creation, whatever it is, I'm doing that for other clients. And then I also have my own work, which is like my kind of profile on social media and like that brand work and all those sorts of things. So if I'm not doing that, I'm like hiking,
Right.
or going to the beach,
Yeah.
doing like my hair things.
So kind of what led you down that road to doing social media and working with brands and kind of being in that space of balancing like your job and your side hustle and your social media presence?
So I actually moved to LA, it'll be 5 years in November.
Wow.
And yeah, it's flown by. But I moved here because I was already doing social media work in Northern Virginia, where I'm from. I was working in DC, doing social media stuff there, but I wanted to be in like the fashion and beauty space. So I moved here, I started working with Chinese Laundry Shoes, which is ironically like down the street.
Oh yeah.
And I did social media for them, and then from there I just like jumped to different brands and have been doing that. But when I first got here, I saw that other people who also work in social media were like branding themselves and working with brands as like their own personal being. And so I realized if I need to differentiate myself from this like huge pool out here, I need to do something more.
I also wanted to talk to you about social media activism and social justice. What are your thoughts on like how people can find their voice when it can really feel like, there's so much dialogue happening, and not really wanting to feel like you're like shouting into a void on social media when you're trying to like address these issues?
I mean, I think primarily it's really important to speak on your own experience. There are like so many causes and topics that you can kind of jump on. But if you don't have your own real point of view with something, then it's not going to be genuine and it's not going to, be the best help to whatever cause that is. So like speak on experience, speak on what's real to you, and that will be natural. And then there's really like not much thinking behind it. It just kind of comes out.
What do you think is like a healthy dose to kind of like integrate these like messages, related to your politics or things like that into the content that you're creating?
I definitely don't have like a schedule per se of like, ooh, today I'm talking about this, but I think with just the state of our country and the world and just how things are consistently rolling out and there's always a different news story every day, I just feel like it's a very fluid part of whatever I'm talking about. Like, sure, I might be talking about hiking one day and then the next day I'm like, hey, our ice raids happening, be careful, this is how you can protect yourself. So I really just think it's, as it comes up, and I feel like I make a real point to just, make sure I'm always kind of throwing that into the mix, even if I'm kind of positioning it as, something that still kind of feels like a regular Instagram caption, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like this huge shift to like, oh, now we're political. Like, no, it's always just like all encompassing all the time.
Right.
So, yeah.
You ready for the next level?
Yes,
Okay.
I guess so.
Next, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about sneaker culture and fashion. So a lot of times it could seem like sneaker culture is sometimes exclusive in terms of like excluding women sometimes, and also excluding people who maybe can't afford certain shoes.
For sure.
So what are your thoughts on people who are interested in kind of like positioning themselves in that space, but maybe feel excluded, whether it's based on gender things or based on socioeconomic things, starting to work their way into the sneaker culture space?
I would just say do what you can with what you have. Obviously, there are like so many levels to it, and I feel like that just goes with kind of life in general across the board. But, you know, you can be a part of it, and you don't have to have this like super exclusive shoe to like be in the club or anything like that. I think just by, you know, having an interest in sneakers, buying sneakers, wearing sneakers, like you're automatically in it. So it's just kind of, you know, owning that, whatever that means to you, and, you know, staying up to date on things, researching things, and by default you're already in it. So, you know, there's no like secret passcode or anything.
So what kind of led you into that space? How did you get interested in fashion and specifically streetwear culture?
I grew up very interested in both things. So when I was younger, I thought, okay, I'm going to be like a magazine editor. That's going to be like my route. But obviously I went a different way. But I'm from Northern Virginia. I grew up being super into like Pharrell and, you know, him introducing me into like really kind of street culture with like ice cream and BBC and that sort of thing. So that was always something that I was like super into, you know, in high school, and I would research and learn, and that same interest carried me to where I am now. We have some special guests.
Well, that's interesting because I feel like I relate to that also, like growing up wanting to go into the magazine space and kind of seeing that like idealized in media and this, that, or whatever. But how do you see like that interest has transformed into what you do now, and kind of like what would you say has been transferable? Like how did it kind of morph and evolve into what you do now?
I actually was just talking about this with someone because one of the things that I really wanted to do, aside from like being a fashion editor or something like that, I also really wanted to be a beauty editor because, you know, who doesn't love beauty products?
Right.
But I feel like I'm now doing that in my own sort of way. You know, I'm always like getting new products sent to me to like test and talk about or whatever, and I'm like, wow, I ended up kind of having that life that I wanted for myself, but under the guise of like something that I would have never imagined. So I'm basically still doing the things that I was like passionate and cared about even back then. Maybe the title now is different, or the way that I'm doing it is different, but it like still manifested. So that kind of still blows my mind.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's actually something that I want to talk to you about a little bit later, probably when we got to the very top. But since you mentioned it, so there are a lot of people who are navigating, again, the social media space and really looking to get into like not only just being an influencer, but being in a place where they can receive gifts and they can receive like goodies and this, that, or whatever. How do you see like the normal person who maybe doesn't work for a big brand or is still trying to figure out where they're going, kind of getting into that and building these relationships with brands and companies to do that?
I mean, I think, you know, obviously in the place that I am now, I had to start somewhere. And so I was, you know, once at like square one. I didn't have anything. I wasn't even sure what I was doing. But I was just like creating content and trying to navigate and figure out what it was that I wanted to share. And so once I did kind of find like the lane and the way that I wanted to express myself online, I started to just like, you know, create content around things that I liked, talk about things naturally that I liked, and then that just kind of snowballed into everything else. And now, like, you know, people want to send me things, I can talk about their stuff or whatever it is. So I think for people who are like, hey, I want to, you know, talk about products and I want to be sent products, it really just starts with finding out what it is that like you're passionate about and that you want to share with the world. And if you do that, then it'll naturally come. You don't have to think about it the other way around of like, I need to share this to get that.
Right.
It's just like focus on yourself and creating the content that you like for yourself, and all that stuff comes secondary.
Nice. Are you ready to hit this last leg?
Yes, let's do it.
All right, let's go over here. So have you always been athletic, or kind of where did your athletic journey start? Because I am super inspired by like even the consistency that I see, even if it's just kind of something that you put out there to like keep yourself accountable, because I know people do that too.
Yes.
But like where did your athletic journey start?
I will say that it's just like always something I guess I've kind of had. Like I was the kid who played outside. So to a backstory, I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. So I have 2 younger brothers.
Okay.
So I was always outside playing with my middle brother, who's only a year apart from me. So, you know, playing football, playing whatever, like the thought of, you know, girls play this and guys play that wasn't really like a concept when I was younger. So I also played like softball on a team and just grew up in like a very athletic household. So I was always accustomed to that. And then as I grew up, I ended up dancing for years, like, you know, through my first year of college. And so then that kind of like took away from me really getting into like the sport of it. Of course, dancing, you have to have some kind of athletic ability, but it's just different.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would run in college, but it was just like dabbling. I never really enjoyed running. But then I moved here and I started doing these like running activations with Nike, which really kind of kicked off like me full swing back into really getting into like those athletic roots. I ended up running a marathon. We ran the Chicago Marathon with the Nike Women's Marathon Project,
Nice.
which I never necessarily ruled a marathon out, you know, as just like a thought, but I also wasn't actively going to do it.
Right.
So when they asked me if I'd be interested, I was just like, you know what? This is my chance, because when am I going to be like, you know what, we're going to train, we're going to do this? I don't know. It probably wouldn't have happened. So from there, you know, I also just like regularly, as one of my hobbies, I have all the sporting equipment in like my husband's trunk, and we'll go and have like a field day on the weekend sometimes and just like play. I feel like it's really important to still keep that kind of like semblance of just being a kid and like experiencing new things, and just, you know, not having those cares of like, oh, I'm not that good at this, so I can't do this, and like not placing restrictions on myself. So, you know, that's a stress reliever. It's still exercise, and looking at yourself as like an adult, like playing outside, like that concept, it sounds funny, but it's so, I don't know, it's like such a good practice to still have.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was going to ask you how you like maintain your consistency and how you kind of keep yourself motivated and even dedicated to be active. So that explains a lot, and it also is just kind of an awesome mindset to have. And so going from there, could you talk a little bit about the hiking club and kind of like how that started and what your kind of like how that came about, and, you know, how that led us to be here hiking today.
Right. Well, I've come to learn that I'm like all or nothing if I'm really into something. And I'm really into hiking, obviously. And so, of course, I can't just be into hiking. I have to make a whole damn club about hiking and like get other people out to do it too. So Hike Club is an all-women's hike club in LA. But it isn't just like a women's hike club, because I feel like those types of things sort of exist. But where I guess the power lies in Hike Club is that it's like an intersectional women's hike club in LA. So when you look at us, it's like, you know, there's people of all different backgrounds, skill level, whatever, and we're all hiking together. And, you know, whether you've grown up in LA and maybe only hit like one trail because that just wasn't a thing, or, you know, you're also from out of town, like we all kind of converge and have these new experiences with each other, and it's really become like a community. Everyone ends up becoming friends out of it. Like I see people on social like talking to each other, and I'm like, oh my god, they met because of Hike Club. So it's just been this like really cool, fun project on the side that also ended up being like another hustle added to the queue, because, you know, now we're working on like getting an official sponsor and like making trips and doing that sort of thing. So it's just like, it's always unraveling.
So do you feel like going about getting sponsorships and things like that is something that you gain more experience from, like in the professional field, like in terms of like job assignments, or is that something that you feel like you kind of navigated as an independent, like influencer, if you will, like person doing your own projects?
I think it definitely helps to have the background being inside the brand to know how like the inner workings work, but ultimately it's definitely like the experience on the other side, on like I guess the creator side of things, where you're approaching brands and like pitching yourself and that sort of deal. So, you know, with this, and I think just a rule of thumb in general, like use your resources. You know, one of my like best friends, who's also my mentor, works for a really big outdoor brand, and, you know, we do work to create content and things like that, and I'm like, well, why wouldn't we work together on something that automatically like, you know what I mean, kind of rolls into it. So, we talked about it and we were like, yeah, this would make a lot of sense to kind of sponsor with my hike club. And then that just kind of unraveled, and like one thing led to another. And so we're working on that right now. But yeah, just use your resources. I think I've definitely built a lot of resources being inside, that kind of like corporate center, and being on the outside, and it all comes to work, in its own way. So don't rule anything out.
So you touched on a few things that I kind of want to expand on, so I hope I remember them all.
Sorry.
But one of the things that I feel like I'm always trying to advocate for is people like working with their friends and kind of like being resourceful in that way.
Yes.
Because I feel like a lot of times when we think about our career and our path, we get very like short-sighted and kind of like one-track minded in a sense of like it has to happen this way.
Right.
And we don't really see like, oh, you have this resource here, this person here. So I think that's super awesome, and I'm glad that you touched on that.
Yes.
But I also wanted to know, what are some tips that you have for people in regards to pitching themselves to brands, since you have that inside and outside perspective for whether partnerships, sponsorships, collaborations, whatever?
I mean, in this landscape, like, it can be challenging. I think generally, like, being a woman of color, like being a Black woman and doing this sort of thing, and not having so many people who look like you that are actually working in these brands, like that poses a challenge in itself, because we're already kind of like being overlooked, just to be able to create with them. So there's so many layers to it. Yeah. But, one, use your resources. If someone can connect you to someone at a brand that you want to work with, use that to your advantage. And don't be afraid to put yourself out there, but know that there are those challenges of, having representative there that can actually like use you for something more than just, their own personal brand gain or whatever it is. Like, make sure that it's mutually beneficial for you.
Right.
And also don't take the no's as like a hard rejection. It's just the nature of what this is. If someone doesn't get back to you, it is what it is. And like I said, these brands aren't necessarily the most inclusive and diverse when it comes to working with, content creators of all different backgrounds. So just know that, there are brands who will see you, who will recognize that, and go where you're celebrated. If you're trying to, do something and it's not working, just let it go. There are so many other brands and so many other options. You can find a different person who will want to work with you, not someone that you have to like, try to reel in.
Yeah. So what do you think is the future for like marketing in like whether it's the apparel space or the sports industry space or whatever, these types of companies that leverage like influencers and like people as individuals, but also like campaigns and like activations and like events and different experiences that people want? Like, what do you think, generally speaking, things are going?
That is...
I know it's a broad question. But
it's a good question. I think, back when it like first started booming and there were like big social media influencers who had like 1 million followers or whatever, and they were getting all of the brand opportunities, I think brands obviously have shifted to now like targeting people who are actually still in the community but also still have a voice that people are paying attention to and listening to. So you don't have to have like 1 million followers to be able to work with these brands to do something. And I think we're going to see just more and more just kind of organic relationships being born out of that. I think there will definitely be more like experiential kind of marketing campaigns that people are going to be a part of. Like, for instance, a lot of the work that I do with Nike, they're like experiential marketing campaigns, running the marathon, or, I ran the Go LA 10K, or I'm in the Nike Legacy League, which we were learning how to play soccer. And it's like, this is an experience that also just ends up helping them with their marketing. They get the assets, they get us talking about it, we're posting about it because we want to. Right. And so I think there are going to be way more brands that are taking that approach. And honestly, doing it that way makes it way more beneficial than just sending someone product and having them post about it. Right. Like, that actually builds brand loyalty, and, it changes the perception not only for you, but for others, because they're like, oh shit, look at what they're doing with her. This is something I couldn't even have imagined. Right. So I think the shift is definitely moving towards that. And with the way that people are marketing, like Hot Girl Summer, that fucking tagline. Oops, sorry, I don't know if I can cuss in this.
No, you can.
That tagline.
Hot Girl Summer.
It is a very hot summer. I'm now censoring myself, but That tagline is everywhere, and it's like, but now you can't just be a brand and say that because people are going to call you out.
Exactly.
Because, like I said, we don't have that representation inside for this to be said everywhere in an organic way. And so now we're challenging it and saying, hey, if you're not supporting, Black women content creators and you're not supporting the Black woman who started the slogan, why are you saying this? So I think there's going to be a general wave of just like, that's not going to be enough anymore. And as you can see, it isn't enough anymore. It's already starting.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will mean that we're actually, hiring people who are representative of like the industry that, you're kind of copying or using and taking from, and that will then trickle down to the way that we are seeing creators and influencers on social media. That will give other people platforms instead of just focusing on kind of like the same old stuff that we've been seeing.
Yeah.
So,
okay, well, perfect. Thank you so much for coming on this hike with me.
Welcome.
And sitting with me and talking to me about all this great information.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it.